Alright, welcome to my video. My name is Eckogen. In this video, we're going to cover the mechanics and the changes to the first boss in BT. These are the roles that you need for Venomsky Drake. You need one tank and one buff transporter. The tank needs to engage the boss at the 7 o'clock position and ideally keeping it facing in that direction. So if you look at the map here, number 2 is our tank. So that's where he's starting, and for most of the fight, that's where he's going to be. Now, the rest of the raid, along with the buff transporter, will stay on the left hind leg of the boss. So for the duration of the fight, poison will constantly be stacking every 2 seconds, up to a maximum of 10 stacks. When you start the fight, an egg will spawn at 7 o'clock, and it is exclusively for the tank. And when the tank hits that egg, it cleanses the poison and gives him a 30-second immunity to poison. Now, the buff transporter is responsible for cleansing the poison for the rest of the raid. The egg for the buff transporter is at the 2 o'clock position, so the raid needs to pay attention and not accidentally hit the egg by mistake. So when the poison starts stacking, the buff transporter goes to the 2 o'clock egg and just hits it once. So this should be done about every 30 seconds or so. They'll receive a 5-second counter or countdown timer, and when the timer expires, it's going to drop a red AoE at their current location. So the AoE needs to be dropped on where the raid members are standing, which should be on the left hind leg. So this AoE will cleanse the poison stacks, but instantly kill anyone who doesn't have any poison stacks. Alright, so when the buff drops, that's the buff right there, it will always be red. The red AoE lasts for 15 seconds, it turns blue and lasts for another 15 seconds before it disappears. So if you're in the spot when it drops, it's going to cleanse your poison stacks. And there's a random chance you'll receive either a red or a blue buff. And both of these will cleanse the poison. And it works exactly the same as the red AoE. So if you, let's say, got the red buff when the red AoE was dropped, then you'll have 15 seconds of the red buff, then it'll change to blue, and so you'll get another 15 seconds before poison starts stacking again. So you'll essentially have 30 seconds of poison immunity. Whereas you can see I got the blue buff, so I'll get 15 seconds of blue, then I'll disappear, then I'll start getting poison stacks. So I only have 15 seconds in total. So it's just RNG if you get red or blue when the poison drops. But if you do not have poison stacks, do not stand at the location where the buff transporter is going to be dropping it, because it will instantly kill you if you do not have any poison stacks. Now, if your buff color matches the current AoE color, then you'll get a 100% AP buff. If it does not match and you stand in it, then you'll get a 50% AP debuff. And if you have no buffs and you stand in the AoE, then nothing happens. So when red AoE drops, if you get red, then stay in it. And if the red AoE drops and you get a blue, like I did, then don't stay in it because they will cause a debuff. Now, ads are going to spawn at 90, 60, and 30%. The number of ads per phase is now a static number of 4 in total. So one will spawn at 12 o'clock, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock. So assign each party to handle the specific ads, and stuns should be applied here. If you do miss any of the ads, it will be an automatic wipe. Now, do not grab the boss because that can mess up his positioning. Now, the reason why we're all standing here is because before the boss leaped, the buff transporter was bringing the buff to us. And since we were already all in this location, we were advised just to stand here and wait for the buff to drop first before moving. Alright, so this message appears. So this is the flower mechanic. So this happens at 80, 50, and 20%. So at 80 and 50%, the boss is going to jump to either 12, 8, or 4 o'clock positions, and it's going to spit a total of 7 poison AoEs at the tank. So the tank needs to kind of like stay along the southern end of the room and move from like a 6 to 9 o'clock position to keep the AoEs organized, and then they're able to pick up the egg along the way as well. At 20%, the boss doesn't really do anything other than just constantly spawning flowers. So that kind of changes the mechanic a little bit, and we'll cover that soon. The reason why the boss did the flower mechanic at 70% was because we started really pushing the mechanics through, like, really, really quickly because of our DPS. Otherwise, the flower phases begin at 80, 50, and 20%. And when these flower phases begin, the only way to remove these flowers is to have a red buff, and then you run into the flower AoE, and that will convert it, and so it will actually damage the boss instead of healing the boss. Because if you leave the flowers alone, they'll start healing the boss, and if you don't have enough DPS, it'll out heal your DPS. All right, so since it's the 60% phase, that's where ads will now spawn. So same thing, there's gonna be 4 ads at 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock. Each party needs to be going to their ad and then stunning it. And then everyone needs to get on the left hind leg, so that way when the buff transporter drops the buff, it cleanses our poison. And since I got a red buff, I stay in the red AoE to get that buff, AP buff increase. All right, so 50%, so he's going to do the flowers. So same thing, he's going to spit 7 poison AoEs at the tank. Now flowers are going to spawn. All right, so the buff was dropped. Since I have a red buff, I'm able to walk into a flower and convert it so that it damages the boss instead of healing him. So whoever has the red buff at this time, when the flower phase starts, needs to immediately go to the flowers and convert them. And then when you go into the flower, it's going to take away your red buff, and so you'll start receiving poison stacks right away. Now, what happened here was that I didn't lose my buff because someone else already had gone to that flower before me, so I just didn't notice that. Otherwise, I should have gone back and really went for another flower and converted it into a damaging flower instead of a healing flower. All right, so now it's going to be the 30% ad phase. So same thing, 4 ads in the same positions. They all have to be CC'd, otherwise it will be a wipe. The final phase after this will be the 20% phase. So like I mentioned before, the boss does not do anything at the 20% phase other than just constantly spawning flowers. So the buff transporter should be getting the buff pretty much about every 15 seconds instead of 30 seconds when this phase starts, because he's going to be constantly spawning the flowers, so flowers have to be kept under control. And then do remember, if you do have the red buff when there are flowers around, you want to get rid of them. By stepping into them, it'll automatically convert them, so they'll start damaging the boss instead of healing the boss. Alright, so there we go. So that is how you do the first boss in BT. Thanks for watching. I'll include the summary of the mechanics in the video description below. If you have any questions, please ask. Hope that helped.